I could see it in their faces the moment I walked into the room. A flicker of irritation, a quick glance exchanged between my son Mark and daughter-in-law Vanessa. They hadn't expected me to overhear their vacation plans. "Mom, we didn't think you'd want to come," Mark said, his voice laced with false concern. "The trip might be too much for someone your age." At 68, I wasn't exactly fragile, but right then, it hit me. I'd become invisible to my own family. What happened next? Let's just say Iris Davenport still had a few surprises up her sleeve. Before we dive back in, let us know where you're tuning in from. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow, I've got something even more special lined up just for you. I had spent too many years shrinking myself to fit the expectations of others. But tonight, I decided to embrace progress, not as an act of defiance, but as a gentle assertion of who I was becoming. The moment felt like a quiet rebellion, but one grounded in self-awareness rather than criticism. When Maya handed me the glass of wine, I accepted it with a smile and said, "I brought something for you, Emma." She looked up, curious as I placed a thick photo album on the coffee table. "For your humanities presentation," I explained. "These are from Paris, Lyon, and the French Riviera." Emma's usual teenage detachment softened. Her eyes widened with genuine interest as she opened the album and started flipping through the glossy pages. "Thanks, Grandma. These look professional," she said, pausing and then adding with adolescent forthrightness. "You look different in these pictures. Happier or something?" I nodded, feeling the truth of it settle inside me. "I felt different," I said quietly. "There's something freeing about being in a place where no one expects anything of you. You get to be exactly who you are." "That sounds nice," she murmured, revealing a glimpse of the sensitive girl behind her usual guardedness. I seized the moment. "Maybe someday you could travel somewhere like that. Maybe we could go together." Her eyes lit up, surprising me. "When I'm older. Like a graduation trip." "Not a theme park trip," I clarified. "Real Europe, for real." "Yes, I'd love that." I felt a swell of genuine desire, not just to show her the places I'd fallen in love with, but to share that sense of liberation I discovered. "There's a catch," I warned. "You'd have to learn at least some French first." "Deal," she said with unexpected enthusiasm, already flipping through the album again. "Oh wow, is that the Eiffel Tower? It's way bigger than I thought." That brief exchange felt monumental, perhaps the first time Emma and I connected as individuals rather than through the usual prescribed roles. I caught Maya watching us with a complex expression as Emma excitedly showed the photos to Ryan, who feigned reluctant interest but clearly was intrigued. Dinner turned out surprisingly pleasant despite the occasional awkward pause. Maya's ratatouille was delicious, and I told her so sincerely. Mark, my son, asked thoughtful questions about my trip rather than the dismissive comments I'd come to expect about seniors' tours. Emma peppered me with questions about French teenagers, their fashion, social life, and the culture around youth, while Ryan showed interest only when I described the motorcycle culture we'd glimpsed in Lyon. "A guy on your tour had a motorcycle?" Ryan asked, the longest sentence he'd spoken to me in months. "Not on the tour," I clarified. "But I made friends with someone who rides. He's about my age and just bought a vintage Triumph after his wife passed away." "Cool," Ryan said with newfound respect. "Grandpa never had a motorcycle, did he?" "Actually, he did, in college. He had a Honda CB350 but gave it up after we married because insurance was too expensive. He always missed it. We talked about getting another after he retired, but then he got sick." "I never knew that about Dad," Mark said softly. "There's probably a lot you don't know," I replied kindly. "We had whole lives before you were born, quiet dreams that didn't always get spoken aloud." A reflective silence settled over the table until Maya asked if I wanted coffee with dessert, a homemade tarte tatin she admitted might not be authentic compared to what I'd tasted in France. The most authentic tarte tatin I had was made by an 80-year-old grandmother in a tiny apartment in Lyon, I told her. "Do you want to know her secret?" No, Maya said, intrigued. Whatever makes you happy when you bake it, I explained. So authenticity isn't about rigid rules. It's about joy in creation. Maya visibly relaxed. I like that philosophy. As the evening wore on, I found myself observing my family with new eyes. They weren't villains in my story, just flawed people navigating their complicated lives. Mark wasn't intentionally cruel when he excluded me from their vacation. He simply hadn't questioned the cultural norm that aging parents quietly retreat. Maya hadn't been taught to value older women's perspectives, so her dismissiveness wasn't deliberate. And the teenagers weren't selfish by design. They were products of a culture obsessed with youth and generational separation. Understanding this didn't erase the hurt or excuse the behavior, but it helped me view our healing process with greater compassion. They were trying, imperfectly, to adapt to this recalibrated relationship where grandma was no longer a convenient resource but a person with real needs and boundaries. When I finally prepared to leave, Mark walked me to my car. The night air was cool against our skin despite the summer heat. "This was nice, Mom," he said, hands shoved in pockets like the teenage boy I once knew. "Different but nice," I replied, searching for words to convey what I was feeling. "Mark, I don't regret taking that trip or standing my ground about the beach house. Those decisions were necessary. But I want you to know I'm open to building something new between us, something based on mutual respect, not just family obligation." He was quiet for a moment, the streetlights casting shadows across his features that reminded me painfully of his father. "I'd like that," he said finally. "And I want you to know I'm proud of you, taking off to France alone, starting your art studio. It's pretty badass, actually." The unexpected compliment made me laugh. Badass isn't a term I ever expected to hear applied to myself, but I'll take it. "Emma thinks so too," he added. "She told her friends her grandma is a world-traveling artist who rides motorcycles. Your cool factor has skyrocketed." "Well, that's the validation I've been seeking all along," I teased, but the knowledge that my granddaughter might be seeing me as a person, rather than a role, warmed something deep inside me. Driving home under a canopy of stars, I felt an unfamiliar lightness. Dinner hadn't been perfect, but it had been honest, a first step toward authentic connection rather than performed harmony. More importantly, I'd maintained my sense of self, neither diminishing my experiences to make others comfortable nor weaponizing them to inflict guilt. I had simply been present as the woman I was becoming, not the woman they expected me to remain. The weeks that followed settled into a new rhythm. Mornings were for routine tasks and beach walks. Afternoons, for painting in my studio. Evenings, for community engagements that would have been unimaginable just months earlier. The discussion group Lara organized met weekly at the library, attracting women from neighboring towns. Gloria's travel club finalized plans for a fall trip to Santa Fe, with 12 members committed, including myself and Marta. Henry's idea for an exhibition evolved into Cape Haven Creates, a monthly art walk featuring local artists displaying work in various businesses around town. My relationship with Mark and his family adjusted like a camera lens, gradually finding focus. There were still awkward moments and occasional missteps on both sides, but the general direction was toward understanding. Emma began stopping by my studio once a week after school, not just to use my French photographs for her project, but because she enjoyed the peaceful atmosphere and appreciated that I never probed into her social life. She'd do homework at the small table by the window while I painted, our companionable silence broken only by her questions about technique or my inquiries about her studies. Ryan remained more distant but showed unexpected interest when I mentioned that Jackson would be visiting Cape Haven in August. Could I meet him? See his motorcycle? He asked during a family dinner, addressing me directly for perhaps the first time in years. "I'm sure he'd enjoy that," I said, touched by this small olive branch. Jackson, who taught mechanical engineering before retirement, could probably answer any questions about engines. My friendship with Jackson had deepened through daily texts and weekly video calls. We exchanged photographs of our respective coasts, book recommendations, and observations about navigating this new phase of life. The ease between us felt both novel and familiar, the comfort of shared experience combined with the excitement of discovery. "I've booked a flight for the 3rd week of August," he announced during one call, his image slightly pixelated but his smile coming through clearly. "If the invitation to visit Cape Haven still stands." "It absolutely does," I confirmed, aware of the pleasant flutter in my chest at the thought of seeing him in person again. "The beach house has a lovely guest room with an ocean view." His eyebrows rose slightly. "Staying at your place, won't that set local tongues wagging?" I laughed, surprised at how little I cared about conventional expectations. I'm already the woman who cancelled her family vacation and ran off to France. My reputation for scandalous behavior is well established. "Well, far be it from me to damage your reputation for rebellion," he replied with a warm chuckle that somehow traveled through the screen and settled comfortably around my shoulders. After we disconnected, I sat for a long time on my deck, watching stars emerge over the ocean, contemplating how dramatically my life had changed in just a few months. I'd stepped off a precipice without knowing if I'd fall or fly, and discovered that flight was possible at any age if you were brave enough to spread your wings. The lighthouse painting was completed by the end of July, my first finished work in decades. Henry insisted on displaying it prominently during the inaugural Cape Haven Creates event, which drew an unexpected crowd of locals and summer visitors. Standing beside my canvas as strangers and neighbors alike offered genuine appreciation, I experienced a validation unlike any before. This had nothing to do with being a mother or grandmother or widow. This was recognition of Iris Davenport, artist, an identity I had surrendered and now reclaimed. Marta sidled up to me during a quiet moment, champagne flute in hand. "Not bad for a woman who was too old for a family vacation," she murmured with satisfaction. "What's next on your rebellion agenda?" I asked, watching the diverse crowd circulate through the transformed bookstore. Summer residents in linen, local fishermen still in work clothes, teenagers drawn in by free refreshments but lingering to examine the art. "I'm thinking of offering art classes," I said aloud as the idea crystallized. "For seniors, yes, but also intergenerational sessions. There's something powerful about creating alongside people at different life stages." "Count me in," Marta declared immediately. "I haven't held a paintbrush since elementary school, but I'm willing to embarrass myself publicly in the name of creative expression." "Embarrassment is optional," I pointed out with a smile. "But so much more interesting than dignity," she countered, raising her glass in a toast. As July melted into August, summer reached its fullest expression in long golden days and warm velvet nights. I found myself taking stock, not just of external changes but of my interior landscape. The woman who once stood frozen in Mark's hallway, overhearing her exclusion, would hardly recognize this version of herself. Now I painted daily, organized community events, planned travel, and yes, anticipated a man's visit with a touch of breathless excitement that felt both new and exhilarating. One particularly beautiful evening, I invited Sophia, my closest friend, to join me for dinner on the deck. We grilled fresh fish and opened a bottle of crisp white wine as the sun sank toward the horizon. "I never properly thanked you," I said as we settled into comfortable chairs, plates balanced on our laps. "Your support when I made that difficult decision meant more than you know." Sophia waved away my gratitude. "I just confirmed a studio rental for you." "You did all the hard parts yourself." "Not just the studio," I corrected gently. "Before that, when I called to block the beach house dates, you didn't question me or try to talk me out of it. You just said okay and handled the details." She took a thoughtful sip. "Because it wasn't my place to question your decisions. Honestly, I was thrilled to see you stand up for yourself. I've watched for years as you accommodated everyone else's needs at the expense of your own." "Was it really that obvious?" I asked, somewhat incredulous. She grinned. "To everyone except you, apparently." I winced at the truth of her words. I thought I was being a good mother, supportive, undemanding. "There's supportive and then there's invisible," Sophia said, setting down her glass. "You crossed that line somewhere along the way. We all noticed it. But it wasn't our place to say anything." "I wish someone had," I admitted. Would you have listened? She challenged with raised eyebrows. Or defended them and insisted everything was fine? The question gave me pause. Probably the latter, I conceded after a moment. Exactly. You needed to reach your own breaking point. And now look at you. She raised her glass in a toast. Instigator of a small rebellion among women of a certain age. The toast of Cape Haven's art scene. Soon to be hosting a handsome motorcycle-riding gentleman caller. I laughed, though a shadow of the old hurt lingered. Perhaps I should thank them for excluding me. It was the push I needed to stop excluding myself from my own life. To necessary pushes, Sophia proposed, clinking her glass against mine. And unexpected flight, I added, watching the sky fade to twilight in triumphant shades of gold and rose. Later that night, as I prepared for bed, my phone chimed with a message from Jackson confirming his rental car for the visit, an appropriately rebellious convertible for coastal drives. Counting the days, I smiled at the screen and typed back. The lighthouse painting is finished. The beach is perfect for morning walks. The motorcycle-obsessed grandson is eagerly awaiting mechanical engineering discussions. Cape Haven is ready for your arrival. His response was quick and loaded with meaning beyond the words. And what about the artist? Is she ready too? The question hung in the air between us, about more than a visit, more than art or travel. Was I ready to open my heart again after so many years of careful guarding? Was I ready for the complications of a bi-coastal connection at our age? The artist, I replied after thoughtful consideration, is discovering that readiness isn't about perfect certainty but willingness to explore the unknown. So yes, she's ready for whatever comes next on this journey. That night, as I set the phone aside and turned out the light, I realized that was true. Not just about Jackson's visit but about every aspect of my reclaimed life. I was ready. For experiences I couldn't yet imagine, for connections still forming, for the continued evolution of a woman who had stepped out of the background and into the center of her own canvas. And that readiness, I understood now, was perhaps the most rebellious act of all. The anticipation of Jackson's visit brought an unexpected flutter of nerves I hadn't felt in decades. The week before his arrival, I scrutinized the beach house with fresh eyes, the faded cushions on the deck furniture, the chip in the bathroom sink I'd long ignored, the seashell collection gathering dust on the mantel. With a burst of energy, I made subtle updates. Nothing dramatic, just small touches to brighten spaces that had become too familiar to truly see. You're nesting, Marta observed bluntly when she stopped by and found me arranging fresh flowers in the guest room. Classic pre-courtship behavior, I joked, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. Courtship hardly seems like the right word at our age. What would you prefer? Senior romance? Mature liaison? Geriatric dance? She settled comfortably on the edge of the bed, clearly enjoying my discomfort. Terminology doesn't matter, Eleanor. The fact you've changed your bedspread 3 times this week does. Twice, I muttered, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from the quilt I'd finally chosen. A handcrafted piece in ocean blues and greens that echoed the view from the windows. That one feels right. Her expression softened. It's okay to be excited about this, you know. To want it to go well. To hope for whatever you're hoping for. I sank down beside her, suddenly overwhelmed by the absurdity of the situation. I'm nearly 70 years old, Marta. I shouldn't be this nervous about a man visiting. I've been married, raised a child, buried a husband, and run my own business for heaven's sake. Yes, she replied gently, and you're also a human being with a heart that's apparently not finished yet. Age doesn't immunize us against hope or vulnerability. Thank goodness for that. Her words settled over me like a benediction, permission to embrace, not resist, the mix of anticipation and trepidation coursing through me. I don't even know what I'm hoping for, I admitted. We live on opposite coasts. We're both firmly rooted in our communities. It's hardly practical to consider anything serious. Ah yes, because practicality is clearly what's been driving your recent decisions, Marta teased. Canceling the family vacation, jetting off to France, starting an art studio, all very sensible, rational choices. I laughed at her assessment. Fair point. I seem to have abandoned practicality somewhere over the Atlantic. Well written, she declared firmly. Practicality is overrated, especially for women our age, who have spent decades being practical for everyone else's benefit. When Jackson's rental convertible arrived, midnight blue, top down despite the threat of wind, I watched from the kitchen window, my heart pounding with excitement and nerves. He emerged tall and lean, silver hair catching the sunlight, dressed casually but with an effortless confidence. I opened the door before he could knock. "Welcome to Cape Haven," I said, smiling. "Eleanor," he replied, genuine pleasure lighting his face as he crossed the space between us. He hesitated briefly before leaning in to kiss my cheek, a gesture both friendly and hinting at something more. "You look even lovelier than I remembered. And you haven't lost your talent for charming exaggeration," I countered, aware I'd taken special care with my appearance that morning. Turquoise sundress, subtle makeup, hair softly framing my face. "Not exaggeration. Accurate observation," he insisted, eyes crinkling at the corners. "The East Coast agrees with you." I felt a blush warm my cheeks and stepped back, gesturing toward the house. "Come in. You must be tired after traveling." "Not at all," he said. "The anticipation of seeing you again gave me all the energy I needed." The easy flirtation continued as I showed him to the guest room and gave a brief house tour. Any awkwardness I feared dissipated, replaced by the same easy connection we'd established in Italy, now deepened by months of phone calls and messages. "This," I said finally, leading him onto the deck overlooking the ocean, "is my favorite spot. Morning coffee, evening wine, spectacular sunrises, occasional storms rolling in. It's all best experienced right here." He moved to the railing, taking in the vista, then turned back to me, voice soft. "I can see why. It's magnificent. Thank you for sharing this with me," I said, meeting his gaze. "This home is special, not just a vacation place but a connection to my past and future." He nodded, understanding the significance. "I'm glad you invited me." The first few days of Jackson's visit unfolded with a gentle ease, a rhythm that felt both new and deeply familiar. We wandered the shoreline together, pausing to admire shells or watch the elegant plovers dart along the water's edge. Lunch found us in a casual seafood shack where Jackson, with his easy charm, persuaded the owner to share the secret to the clam chowder recipe. The drive along the coast in his convertible, with the top down, wind tousling our hair and the sun warming our faces, made me feel decades younger, even as we shared stories that had shaped us. Conversation flowed naturally, effortless and varied. From books we'd read recently to his daughter's upcoming wedding, to my experiments with painting techniques. Unlike the awkward dates I vaguely recalled from years past, there was no need to impress or perform. Just the pleasure of two people genuinely interested in one another's thoughts. That first evening, as we sat on my deck watching the sun dip behind the horizon, Jackson reached over and took my hand in his. The simple gesture was electric, a wordless acknowledgement of the connection we'd nurtured across miles and months. "I wasn't sure what to expect from this visit," he admitted, his thumb gently tracing small circles on my palm. "I knew I enjoyed your company in Italy and valued our conversations, but I wondered if seeing each other again would break the spell, if what we had was just a vacation connection, meaningless back in the real world." I looked into his steady eyes and whispered, "I'm discovering that the connection is even stronger here." He smiled softly, squeezing my hand. "Seeing you in your element, this place you've created, the life you've built, the impact you're having, it's remarkable, Eleanor. You're remarkable." His words silenced the self-deprecating response that rose to my lips. Instead, I simply squeezed his hand back, allowing myself to receive the compliment fully. We sat together as twilight deepened and stars began to emerge, neither of us willing to break the peaceful silence until a cool breeze nudged me to reach for a throw blanket. I draped it around us both, nestling closer. "No rush," he murmured, arms sliding around my waist. "None at all," I agreed, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the evening air. The days that followed were dreamlike. We spent hours in the studio. Sometimes I painted while he read. Sometimes we talked about our art, our pasts, and the quiet hopes we both still carried. Sharing these intimate moments, unhurried and honest, felt like rediscovering parts of myself I'd long neglected. Jackson was nervous, too, despite his confident exterior. He confessed how after Marianne's death, he'd struggled to find who he was beyond one half of Jack and Marie. We both understood that loss could obscure identity, and reclaiming it was a slow, tender process. One evening, as we cooked dinner together, I mentioned Richard. "He would have liked you," I said softly. Jackson looked at me, sincerity in his eyes. "And would he have approved of this?" I considered the question. He made me promise I wouldn't spend my life alone. But I think he imagined someone more sensible, not a motorcycle-riding suitor from Seattle. Jackson laughed, a rich, genuine sound that warmed the room. "So I'm not what he expected." "Definitely not," I smiled. "But he also wanted me to be happy. And you make me very happy." He dropped the wooden spoon he'd been holding, closed the distance, and cupped my face gently. "May I kiss you, Eleanor Davenport?" "Please," I whispered. Our kiss was tentative at first, then deepened with certainty and passion, awakening sensations I thought long dormant. When we finally parted, breathless, his forehead rested against mine. "I've wanted to do that since Florence," he confessed. "Why wait so long?" I asked, fingers still tangled in his silver hair. "Because some things shouldn't be rushed," he said softly. "And because you were worth waiting for." Dinner was slightly overcooked that night, but neither of us noticed. Midway through Jackson's visit, Marcus invited us for dinner, a gesture that surprised me given his previously lukewarm response to the mention of Jackson. I accepted with some trepidation, I admitted to Jackson as we drove. "I'm not sure how my son will react to us being, well, us." Jackson chuckled. "I've raised 2 children and dealt with university politics for 30 years. I think I can handle one protective son." As we pulled into Marcus's driveway, Jason emerged from the garage. His usual teenage nonchalance momentarily abandoned, he eyed the convertible with undisguised admiration. "This your car?" he asked Jackson, barely acknowledging me. "Just a rental," Jackson replied with a grin. "But a good one. Do you drive yet?" Jackson asked. "Got my learner's permit last month," Jason said, straightening. "Dad only lets me practice in empty parking lots though," he added. "Smart man," Jackson nodded. "That's how I started with my daughter too. Once she had the basics, I took her to a closed track where she could really learn how a car handles different speeds. Makes for safer driving later." Jason's eyes widened. "There are tracks where teenagers can drive supervised." "Yes," Jackson confirmed. "I'd be happy to mention some options to your dad if you're interested." Just like that, a connection was made. By the time we entered the house, Jason was eagerly showing Jackson model cars he'd assembled years ago, forgotten until this moment. Vanessa greeted us warmly, clearly having made an effort both with the house and her appearance. Lily appeared from her room, initially detached as usual, until Jackson mentioned his daughter taught art history. Suddenly, Lily had questions about college programs and career paths in the arts. Marcus watched all this with a mixture of surprise and cautious approval. When Jackson offered to help him at the grill, I braced myself for an interrogation. But through the kitchen window, I saw them engaged in genuine conversation, punctuated with occasional laughter. "He's nice," Vanessa said quietly beside me. "Different than you expected?" I asked. She hesitated. "I guess I thought when Marcus said you'd met someone, it would be, I don't know, someone trying to take advantage. You hear stories about widows being targeted." I felt a flicker of irritation but found myself appreciating her misplaced concern. Jackson was a retired professor with a pension, 2 successful adult children, and a home he owned outright. "If anyone's a catch here, it's not me," I said with a faint defensiveness. Vanessa's expression shifted from embarrassment to respect. I think you're selling yourself short. You're vibrant, interesting, capable of surprising all of us. Coming from Vanessa, that was high praise indeed. I accepted the olive branch silently. Dinner was surprisingly enjoyable. Jackson integrated seamlessly, engaging Jason with thoughtful questions, complimenting Vanessa's cooking with specific, genuine praise, and chatting with Marcus about motorcycle safety in a way that was both informative and lightly humorous. Your young man is quite the diplomat, Marta observed the next day over coffee. Good looking too, she added with a grin. Those shoulders and the way he looks at you like you're the most fascinating creature he's ever seen. He does make me feel seen, I admitted, unable to hide my smile. Seen and appreciated, Marta corrected with satisfaction. As you deserve. When are you going to visit him in Seattle? She asked suddenly. Caught off guard, I hesitated. Jackson's visit was nearing its end, and we hadn't directly discussed what would happen afterward. We haven't, I said, trying to sound casual. It's all still very new. Marta fixed me with a knowing look. New doesn't mean temporary, Eleanor. Unless that's what you want it to be. No, I answered without hesitation. That's not what I want. Then maybe it's time for a conversation about next steps, she suggested gently. I took Marta's advice to heart, though I was uncharacteristically nervous about initiating the talk. Jackson and I had been living in a sort of enchanted present during his visit, neither looking backward nor too far ahead, simply enjoying each day as it came. Introducing the future, with all its practical complications of distance and established lives, felt like risking the delicate balance we'd achieved. On his final evening in Cape Haven, after dinner overlooking the harbor, we walked along the beach beneath a canopy of stars. I don't want to leave tomorrow, Jackson said quietly as we paused to watch waves lap at the shore. I don't want you to go, I replied, turning to face him. These days with you have been, I don't have adequate words, I admitted, frustrated at my own inarticulacy. He smiled and reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering on my cheek. I know exactly what you mean. It feels like we've created our own little world here, just real enough to be meaningful, just separate enough from ordinary life to feel magical. But tomorrow, reality intrudes. I sighed. You return to Seattle, I stay here. Separated by an entire continent. The question, Jackson said thoughtfully, is whether what we've found is worth the effort it will take to bridge that distance. His honesty was refreshing. No games, no manipulation, just truth. What do you think? I asked, needing to hear his perspective. He took both my hands. At our age, we know better than most how precious genuine connection is, how rare. I think what we've discovered deserves exploration, not abandonment. I'm willing to make whatever accommodations necessary to see where this might lead. Relief and joy washed over me. I feel the same. So, he continued with a note of practical planning, we need a strategy. Regular visits for one. I'd like you to come to Seattle, meet my daughters, see where I live. And I'd be happy to return here whenever you'll have me. We have technology too, video calls, texts, emails. Not the same as being together, but better than nothing. And maybe, eventually, extended stays. A month in Seattle during your harsh winter months, a month here during summer. The idea of sharing living spaces beyond brief visits was thrilling and terrifying. It represented a level of commitment I hadn't contemplated since Richard's death, a willingness to reshape my independence to make room for partnership. That's a significant step, I said honestly, but not unwelcome. Maybe start with shorter visits and see how it develops. Perfectly reasonable. We don't need to rush, Jackson agreed. We have time. His words nearly brought tears to my eyes. At our age, time was both precious and uncertain, yet Jackson spoke with an optimistic assurance about our future. Not reckless youth, but deliberate choice to focus on possibilities. When would you like to come to Seattle? He asked, brightening. October, I suggested. reviewing my commitments after the Santa Fe trip with the Cape Haven ladies. The beach house is typically quiet then. I could stay for a week or two without disrupting rentals. Perfect. He pulled me close, his enthusiasm infectious. The days until my Seattle visit flew by. I balanced studio work with modest preparations at home, stocking the fridge with local specialties, arranging for a boat outing, planning a beach picnic, and reluctantly reserving the lighthouse for a special dinner. The morning of Jackson's arrival, I woke early and headed to my studio, painting with bold strokes that captured the sense of liberation I felt, breaking free from constraints that had limited me for too long. When Jackson's convertible pulled into the driveway right on time, I was ready to meet this moment with courage and authenticity. As I opened the door, I realized how far I'd come, how much I'd reclaimed, not just as an artist, but as a woman willing to love and be loved again. Jackson's visit continued to unfold with a comforting naturalness that surprised me. The days were filled with simple pleasures, long walks along the beach, spontaneous picnics, and quiet afternoons in my studio where he watched as I painted, his genuine curiosity a balm to my lingering insecurities. Conversation flowed easily between us, ranging from profound reflections on loss and renewal to light-hearted debates about music and cooking. It felt as though time had folded, bridging decades and miles, allowing us to rediscover parts of ourselves alongside each other. Our connection deepened in ways neither of us had anticipated. One evening, after sharing a home-cooked meal, Jackson reached across the table and took my hand, his eyes reflecting a mix of hope and vulnerability. "Being here with you feels like coming home," he said softly. I squeezed his hand in response, feeling the truth of his words resonate deep within me. When Marcus invited us for dinner, I was cautious but hopeful. I worried about the potential awkwardness, but Jackson's calm confidence steadied me. To my surprise, the evening was warmer than expected. Jason, usually distant, warmed to Jackson immediately, especially when they found common ground in model cars and motorcycles. Vanessa seemed genuinely pleased, and even Marcus engaged in easy conversation. It felt like a small but significant step toward healing old wounds. As Jackson's visit neared its end, the inevitable talk about the future loomed. One night, standing beneath a blanket of stars on the beach, we faced the reality of distance and the challenge it posed. "Is what we have worth the effort?" I asked quietly. He took my hands in his, eyes steady and sure. "Yes. At our age, we understand the rarity of genuine connection. I'm willing to do what it takes to see where this goes." His words gave me courage. We discussed plans for regular visits, video calls, and perhaps spending extended time together in each other's homes. The prospect was both thrilling and daunting, a chance to build something real, grounded in mutual respect and understanding. When I finally flew to Seattle, I was filled with a mixture of excitement and nerves. Jackson's world welcomed me with open arms. His home, his friends, his city all became extensions of my own life. Meeting his daughters was a pivotal moment. Their warmth and intelligence mirrored his own, and their acceptance felt like a blessing. In Seattle, we shared quiet mornings, bustling afternoons, and serene evenings filled with music and conversation. Each moment affirmed the connection that had blossomed between us. A love not defined by youth or impulse but by the wisdom of experience and the courage to embrace new beginnings. As my visit came to a close, I felt a deep gratitude for this unexpected chapter in my life. The woman who had once faded into the background was now vibrant, whole, and ready for whatever came next. With Jackson by my side, the future felt not only possible but full of promise. The days after Jackson's departure settled into a gentle rhythm, marked by a tender mix of longing and contentment. His presence lingered in the soft glow of the guest room, the silver pendant resting lightly against my skin, and the countless messages that crossed the miles between us. I found comfort in the routine of daily life, yet each moment held a subtle charge, a reminder of the new possibilities opening before me. Back in Cape Haven, the community I had helped nurture buzzed with renewed energy. The art studio thrived, and the small but vibrant circle of women I'd connected with grew stronger. Our shared creativity became a refuge, a celebration of life beyond conventional expectations. Marta's unyielding support and quick wit reminded me daily that age was no barrier to reinvention. Occasionally, I caught myself smiling at small signs of change. Marcus's more thoughtful phone calls, Lily's visits to the studio, Jason's growing ease in family gatherings. These shifts weren't always perfect or immediate, but they were real, a quiet mending of old divides. Preparing for the next phase with Jackson felt like stepping into a new kind of adventure. The idea of spending extended time in each other's homes was exciting and unnerving, a test of compatibility beyond the romance of visits. Yet the promise of shared mornings, conversations over coffee, and the blending of two separate lives gave me hope. When October arrived, my second trip to Seattle was met with warm welcomes and familiar sights. The city no longer felt distant or intimidating but welcoming, a place where my heart could stretch beyond the boundaries of my past. Jackson's world became my world, each discovery deepening our bond. Together, we navigated the delicate dance of merging routines and expectations. His daughters, Catherine and Elizabeth, proved not just supportive but eager to include me as part of their family tapestry. The dinners, conversations, and laughter we shared brought a sense of belonging I hadn't expected to find again. As the symphony performance drew to a close on my final night in Seattle, I felt a profound sense of peace. Here, amidst music that spoke of both longing and hope, I realized that this chapter of my life was not about endings but new beginnings. With Jackson, I had found a companion not just for the joys but for the complexities of life. Returning to Cape Haven, I embraced the growing certainty that my life was truly mine to shape. No longer confined by others' expectations or past roles, I stood ready to explore the full spectrum of my desires and dreams. The journey that began with a cancelled vacation had blossomed into a vibrant tapestry of love, creativity, and connection. In the quiet moments before sleep, I often touched the pendant Jackson had given me, a small but powerful symbol of all that was possible when courage met opportunity. And as I drifted off, I knew this was only the beginning of a beautiful, unfolding story.